Welcome to Offwatch, our weekly interview series. We're always taking your suggestions as to who would make a good subject for an interview, and a lot of you have requested that we talk more to the navigators. So we hooked up with Libby Greenhalgh. She's two-time competitor in the race, once with the all-female Team SCA, and then most recently Team Scallywag. And I won't need to tell any fans of the race that there was plenty to discuss there. Also, she gave us some pretty strong words about what the race should be doing to help female sailors for the future. Now, if you want to give us a suggestion as to who we should be talking to next, do so in the comments below. And of course, like and subscribe for many more interviews to come. Enjoy. Libby Greenhalgh is a twice competitor in the ocean race. First, as navigator for Team SCA, bridging a 10-year gap for all-female teams participating in the race. And then more recently with Scallywag in the last edition. Now, she is known for a shrewd scientific background and a real skill at knowing how the weather dictates what's going to happen out on the racecourse, possibly honed by years in the British Meteorological Office and working for the British Olympic sailing team. Libby, thank you very much for talking to me. I know that as a youngster, you competed at a high level. I mean, World Sailing Youth Games and things like that. Some people I know have decided to brush up on their weather knowledge to sharpen up their sailing skill. For you, was it, no, I fancy a career in weather, or was it always about the competing?
I guess actually, because I sailed all my life, it was sailing that brought me to the weather. Because obviously, ultimately, we were there going, oh, what's the weather doing? Can we go sailing? And back then, we were looking at like teletext on the TV to get a forecast. The inshore waters teletext forecast was pretty good for the ponds that we sailed on. So, and because of that, and obviously because my parents sailed, and we had like a little wind anemometer on our house. So, we used to have a keen interest just through that. And I think just from that, it just always interested me. And I guess because it did, the sailing that I was doing and all of that, it did enhance that. But ultimately, it was like, when you're thinking about, what can I go on and do? I'm like, well, this is a subject I'm interested in. And as I went through college and school and towards university, you could start to see that there were potentially careers in sailing that were also associated with the weather. So I kind of also felt, it might have the potential to keep me in my sport, or vice versa. And it's a difficult call at that, when you're sort of 16, 17, 18 to sort of think about what you want to do. And whereas I was like, well, actually, I love the weather. It supports my other main passion that I'd equally like to pursue as a career. So it was kind of married together like that a bit.
And it's not my forte. So help me sort of draw the distinction between meteorology. I'm going to have to try that one again. You know the word I'm trying to say. Someone that reads the clouds and the winds. And then a navigator, because somewhere along the line, you've gone from knowing what the wind's going to do to knowing what to do with it. Was that the involvement with the British sailing team? Where do we go from one to the other?
I mean, that's an interesting question on that front. I mean, obviously, reading the wind, I'm very much initially a small boat sailor, dinghies, and like you said, did the youth worlds, did the Olympic program, and so it's very much looking at how to read the wind and the effects the land has on quite a small scale, with probably the largest scale for a long time that I sailed on was something like the Solent, and maybe had done a bit of cruising, but not really hugely offshore or anything. But you were always looking at that. How do I get around the course the fastest? And it's the same thing, but just almost on a bigger scale with navigation in a way. And actually, with some of the larger scale stuff, it's when you start doing offshore stuff and looking at island effects and just the different effects as you do offshore routing, you're sort of like, oh wow, this is even more obvious to see, to then be able to better explain the stuff that's happening at the small scale, because you're like, look how. And I guess it also the biggest thing it made you realize is actually super hard to interpret on that smaller scale, because when you look at the bigger scale, we're already in a massively turbulent airflow. I mean, the classic one I always think about is the Canary Islands and just how far downwind the effects that has. And yet you might go and race in a Olympics or in a smaller boat class in like a 2-mile section and be trying to read that, and you're like, wow, and yet over and above it you've got this going on. So I think it's just fascinating. And yeah, I mean, I guess they go hand in hand. And from the weather side of things, and the fact that going and pursuing a weather career, that was, you know, I understood that bigger scale picture, but often you don't often find someone who's probably also got that smaller scale. You might meet someone who's a trained weather forecaster and then sort of goes into navigation, but understanding that balance with racing and the smaller scale is quite a blend of skills in terms of being able to go, actually, well, now it's a priority on this much smaller scale to think about this versus this much bigger scale, this is happening. And to kind of be able to bridge all of that is quite a difficult thing, depending on what angle you've come from.
It really fascinating. I've never thought about it in that way, but of course, yeah, small windward leeward, you're trying to predict a left shift, and then over 100-mile course, actually,
you do the same.
Yeah. Okay, so then Team SCA then, when you come into Team SCA, I'm wondering, do you come into Team SCA as, in your mind anyway, a fully fledged navigator, not only being able to do the weather routing, but also being able to join a team like that and go, I'm going to be able to plot where we're going to go, how we're going to go, and I'm going to get us around the world efficiently?
I mean, the Team SCA was a hugely unique opportunity in terms of my offshore navigation experience. It was arguably not a lot at that moment when I first sort of applied. But the biggest benefit that the team saw that I had was the knowledge of the weather, basically, and that understanding versus, hey, I can open up the software, I can run a route, it's showing this, and this, and you know, and so whereas having that bigger understanding of the weather, and you know, I'd spent 8 years just looking at systems, looping, and satellite imagery, and all of that kind of stuff. Like, I think that kind of skill or knowledge or just, you know, experience, much like you say, going around the world 4 times, just gives you that experience of just stuff that until you've sort of done it, you almost can't get.
And I can imagine as well that surely you've seen, and you've probably been frustrated by, people that can open the laptop and run the routing software and load in the weather model, but can't tell you why the routing and the weather model is saying one or the other. The skill, but they haven't got the knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's incredible now what those tools allow you to do, and the mathematics behind them, and the stuff it's, you know, what it's able to tell you, but almost it sometimes gives and empowers people a lot, but it almost gives them just the wrong amount of knowledge. You know, it's like wicked. There's now a line on a screen. I know where I'm going, but to be able to interpret the pitfalls or the strength in it, because actually it's only drawn that line based on a 1 second difference to a different route that could be a little bit more like this, that's then only a 1 second difference, and then suddenly you're finding actually the bias is really one way, or you know, or it's, if you start 5 minutes later, it makes a difference, and it's just because you caught onto that system. And but you know, there's ways of people learning that in a different way, as opposed to, I guess I would look at it from the weather systems and think, oh, the pitfalls are probably here. You can use the navigation tools now, the routing, to find that by, you know, most people are then taught actually always run a route like this. So you know, you know, run it so you start an hour earlier or an hour later and see if it makes a big difference, and run it so that you push it this way and see if that you know, and they sort of try and find the weaknesses that way. So, you know, there's different ways of how people probably have now learned to use those tools to then interpret the weather and find their best route.
Well, whatever you did back with Team SCA and leg one, it was certainly working. I want to ask you a little bit about the legacy of Team SCA, which we are very much still feeling in the industry. And I know with the Magenta Project, it's something that you're still actively involved with, and we'll come to that. But let's go straight into that nav then. Leg one, I got the impression that you jumped on the boat relatively late compared to some of the other team members. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but either way, when the boat left the dock, I'm sure as any navigator in a one design fleet, you're under pressure to find that opportunity to split off and build some gains. And you guys, I mean, those first few hours, you had a storm out of the Med. You were on fire and, you know, leading out through the strait.
Yeah, I mean, I guess relatively late to the team. Arguably, I sort of officially joined them in June, and most of them have been there for some up to 18 months. And yeah, I think the biggest thing was there was this whole unknown of, how fast are we really? How will we go? That sense of things. I didn't think, other than, yes, okay, I hadn't gone around the world, but we had experienced people on our boat, which I think people maybe sometimes sort of forget. But Sam has already gone around once, and almost probably 3 times, arguably with a few stops or breakages along the way. Dee done 5 times or something, and then Liz, there were quite a few that had obviously already gone round, and Sam's strength probably with her sailing is significantly in that nav department, and arguably actually when I think she first joined the team, that was the role that she initially saw herself potentially filling. And so that was why, in terms of the nav role, like the strength of me coming with the weather was an addition to that. And it was very much a shared role, that in terms of the nav stuff, while I did the bulk of the kind of grunt work, the decision making and the whole process there was very much a shared role. And I think people say, oh, you must have been looking to kind of make breaks and pull away from the fleet or do this. But it was like, no, we were just always looking to take what we felt was the correct route and the fastest route.
What are those kind of moments like as the navigator that's making those calls? Because I can imagine, like you say, you go one way, you go the other, then you've got to converge again. For everybody else that's sailing on board the boat, they've got to think about grinding on the winch, pulling that, moving the stack, weight forward, back. There's so much that they've got to think about in that moment. But the moment for you and the decision for you, I imagine, plays out so slowly while you're waiting to see what you've done is right or wrong. How agonising can those moments feel?
Yes and no, because I think once you've done the tack and you see the numbers, you're like, right, that's the numbers we're on, and you know the outcome. From my perspective, and I think that's the other thing when people struggle with big losses or big gains, is like, actually conceptually for me, I already know. I'm already like, yeah, this is going to be a massive loss. And then you sort of go, this is not going to be good, but like the concept of it, and especially when a loss builds up after sked, like, whereas I'm like, no, it'll be like a 400-mile loss, or like you know how long it'll be, but then you'll also be like, no, then it'll compress and we'll get right back to where we were. So like, we have big moments like that of extension and compression, even on that first leg, where it's like, no, this is going to be a whopping loss. And while I understand that as it builds in each time and you're reading out the schedule, you're like, yeah, we've lost another 50 miles, everyone. They don't necessarily find it quite so jolly.
I imagine it's a little bit like, an aircraft captain over the tannoy, or, the warning lights go on and the captain comes over the tannoy and you're reading the tone in their voice to see. Do you have to be a bit careful about the look on your face when you come up the hatch and maybe, relay the information?
Yeah, I mean, there were times I used to sometimes not dread it, but I'd be like, all right, here we go. And I kind of not made a joke out of it, but I made a bit of a thing. It's like, oh, we're doing scores on the doors, everyone. Because it was a bit like, and each time you would then not caveat it, but you'd talk about it and say, look, we are going to lose every sked for the next 4 skeds, then that's it, and it is going to suck. But it feels to have to, and everyone's itching to get that position report, and it just feels like, and they do, even though you've caveated it or spoken about the fact that it just feels like a sucker punch to some of them, and everyone reacted differently. There were some people that you would just be like, okay, cool, thanks, carry on, not a problem. And other people that literally you could just see them physically go, oh, and and that is something I think as a team that people probably talk about, like, how do you manage and deal with skeds, and what's the process, and everyone's going to deal with it differently, but actually how do we work out how to support ourselves? Because I think our biggest thing was like, we did so many compressions and things like that throughout the race that I was almost like, well, it doesn't matter, there's going to be another opportunity and we'll just take that instead. And I think we were always quite good at that. Like, even if we had made a loss, we were pretty good at finding the next opportunity and making sure we got it reasonably right. And
as we were saying, obviously, Team SCA, certainly for leg 8 anyway, come away with a leg win. That's a vindication for any team that, they can hold their own and they can perform. And then for you yourself as well, where you were saying at the beginning that maybe you came into that edition of the race without as much navigational knowledge as some others, but you claimed the B&G Navigators Prize for the edition of the race. And I think for people that maybe don't know what this isn't B&G saying we'll give you a prize. This is the other navigators in the race saying, yeah, you impressed me there, and sort of accumulated point system. I mean, that had to feel pretty good.
Yeah, no, for sure that did, yeah. Like, I think any acknowledgement from your peers and your surrounding sailors is always good, especially when, that edition, I think the majority of them have done 3 or more laps around the planet. So, yeah, for sure. And I think, definitely that was sort of made me think, okay, and I think also it's that whole thing, there's always that bit of doubt of, again, like, who was I almost in the scheme of things to sort of come in and sort of do that role. So I think not a bit of vindication, but yeah, I think it sort of shows that actually the knowledge is there.
Well, because then at the end of that that edition of the race, you seem to sort of step back into, very familiar shoes, advising from the shore, working with things like that. Obviously, the Magenta Project, which again, I want to touch on in a minute. But then we get to Team Sunhunkai Scallywag, and you join that team. And I'm really interested to discover how that conversation started, because David Witt is, and certainly at that time, he was such a character in the race. And he didn't hide anything, when he was happy, when he was sad, it was all sort of there. And obviously that fit between the skipper and the navigator wasn't perfect. Steve Hales was on. He stepped off after the second leg. I think Antonio Fontes was on for 2 legs. He got injured. Then it was you got called up. Did you know David beforehand? I mean, how did that sort of come about?
I had sort of contacted the team because they had, I obviously recognised they had one less crew member effectively. So there was that opportunity. And, arguably I'm a small person. I've also gone around the planet on one of these boats already. And in a way, it was kind of like, not why wouldn't you, but you could, even in the setup with not necessarily coming on as a navigator, but someone coming on with that strength is only going to be a bonus, especially arguably when a lot of their team didn't have a huge amount of experience in the race. And so I felt there was an opening there. And I guess, while I'm a navigator, I'm also a sailor. And sometimes I also think people often forget that, like, actually, I've sailed most of my life and raced, all sorts of boats at many different levels. And I think that's something that sometimes is forgotten. So, like, I sort of felt I came with quite a few skills to add to that crew, even if that navigation role wasn't there. So I had been sort of chatting to them from the beginning of the race on and off as to what their thoughts were, and basically sort of said, if you're thinking about going down the route of having the extra pair of hands, which I think you probably will be fairly shortly, then, this is who I am and here I am, kind of thing.
Because, as you say, that was the first time that the boat had sailed, quote unquote, fully crewed. David Witt had said he wanted to try and save weight. And it's not just the weight of a human being, it's the weight of the water, the weight of the provisions, the weight of everything. So here they are now, you guys are sailing off leg 4, and you're sailing with a full load of people. You've just jumped on board. Can you recall what the feeling was like for that team at that time? Because I think it's fairly safe to say they hadn't matched up to where they'd wanted to be. I mean, who does really, unless you're leading? But then somebody comes on board, like you say, a bit of 65 experience. They've got the numbers right. Was it? Oh, this is finding a good gear here.
I literally turned up 2 days before we set off on that leg. So having done the Sydney Hobart and then almost flown directly from there.
Did you, hang on, so sorry, 2 days. Did you even have time to learn everybody's names before you left the dock?
Not really. I remember, this sounds bad. I remember for a while getting Nipper, Alex, a bit confused because then I was like, who's Ben? And Ben was Nipper. And I was like, ah! I was like, but I was fortunate in that I did know Parko previously, and I did know Tristan, who also joined at the same time as me. So from that perspective, and obviously Fish is just hugely welcoming and puts you at ease pretty easily, and and they're all super lovely people. So, and I knew Anamika obviously pretty well. So from that perspective, it was kind of not. But I have to admit, to begin with, I was like, oh God, I just won't use. Good job, our names on the backs of our shirts.
And had the way that the 65s were being sailed changed much from where you were before? Because obviously the winches are still in the same place. The sails wardrobe was a little different. But were you able to sort of jump on, and did you have to relearn?
Nothing. I had to try and remember. Nothing had really changed, which was good. Obviously made that a bit easier. And arguably in my role as the navigator, I was like, okay, the nav station's still in the same place. The buttons are all pretty much the same. And they'd obviously got used to sailing the boat without my pair of hands. So maneuvers and stuff didn't really change initially, because it's like, well, this is how we're doing it. And then basically I kind of just tagged in and helped out on some handles more, my massive muscle power, always good. But yeah, so from that perspective, and I guess it just, and then what was interesting was seeing the maneuvers, and then perhaps being able to go, effectively we are saying shorthanded or with less power, and actually these are some of the things that we benefited from with SCA in terms of how you do things. And so I think as and when there were opportunities to then help sort of move that stuff forward, but ultimately you've just got to be able to do the maneuver. Doing a maneuver badly could completely ruin your race or make you not back miles, but ultimately that's not the thing that necessarily wins you the leg. So that was kind of okay. It's more about finding the straight line speed.
And certainly on that leg as well, because I want to sort of take apart this leg in a bit more detail, because this was the leg for Team Sun Hung Kai Scallywag sailing into Hong Kong. This was the one that, there was that wonderful quote from David Witt saying, he'd trade all of his World Championship wins, of which there are many, to win that particular leg. It was the one that really mattered to the team and the backers and the supporters and everything. I imagine it would be lovely to jump on board a boat, be able to offer some advice about, on Team SCA we did this, feel like you're contributing, but you are the navigator, you are responsible for that job. And relatively quickly into that leg, we get to this infamous moment where you have to backtrack from, this badly charted, or, well, depending on which way you look at it, different charts having differing opinions. We won't point fingers, but what was the moment where you basically realized, okay, we're going to need to do something that's going to feel really hard here. We're going to need to unwind ourselves?
Yeah, it was pretty tricky, that for sure, in terms of realizing and then getting Witty and Warrow. We all had a big discussion. We looked at the different charts, and then it was like, which side do we go? And I was all for chucking a tack in, and they were like, it's got to be quick. So even within that, then a discussion of how to best do this as we're still going towards it. And just realizing, wow, now we've fully shot ourselves in the foot here. But I guess ultimately being like, there's a whole world of leg ahead, and we're all going to stop. So, we've just got to deal with it.
Obviously, this whole thing kind of unravels because after the addition of the race before, with Team Vestas Wind bumping into St Brandon Reef, race control and monitoring things relatively tightly, they give you a little bit of a nod to say, all within the rules. As a navigator, as somebody there, maybe you got the email, maybe it was picked up by somebody else. How was that moment received by Witty and the rest of the team? Because like you say, they have a reputation for being, if you're part of this team, you're part of this team. It's loyalty before anything else. I could imagine feeling quite nervous having to go, we have a problem, and it kind of fits into my remit.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the worst thing that you can have happen as a navigator. And I was like, wow, I've literally stepped on this boat not very long. And probably one of my thoughts is that would be interesting what happens in Hong Kong when this leg's over. But you've got to put your hand up to it. And like I said, it was then like a discussion of which way do we want to go around it. I was like, this is what I look at, but you need to look at this because this is a pretty big decision. Or big decision, and I want you to be aware of the whole situation. So as opposed to just going, right, we need to attack everyone, and everyone being like, that's a bit weird. Oh yeah. I guess there's different ways you can handle it or what have you. But I mean, either way, it was going to be pretty obvious something was up because we either had to tackle, freaking bail up and jive. So, which is quite a big maneuver either way. So, and I think it was just because, look, this is a situation. We've had a nudge about this. I've looked at this, and this, and I think but ultimately it's the whole thing is the last thing you want is to be sat on a reef.
Yeah. I mean, interesting the way you talk about it quite pragmatically. That I'm sure comes with all the years of competitive racing that you've done. But if you did have any doubts about what might happen when you get to Hong Kong, as you say, the rest of the leg, or certainly around about that middle point, so I'll paint the picture. You're a little bit behind, having to now, you've got some miles to catch up. But what you do with the ability to maybe read ahead, when did you see, I mean, I won't blow the moment, you can have it, but when did you see, hang on a second here, we could overtake not one, not two, but quite a few boats if we play these next 24 hours correctly?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was difficult to say whether it was like, if we play the next 24 hours correctly, we could I wasn't like, we could overtake them, but I was like, well, we're totally going to compress because they've stopped now at whatever, and that always happens. But then you always worry, will they get out? And then off you go again. Yeah, I mean, I thought we'd probably close, and then we got to that point of closing, and I was like, wow, now they're really screwed. We're going to be miles ahead here.
I'll put my hand up. You're obviously a better navigator than me, but I saw the deficit that you guys had at that point in the leg, and I thought, okay, well, they might be able to overtake one or two boats, but this is going to be a huge mountain to climb. And I remember David Witt saying, absolutely, come on, no, we got to win this leg. This is the one we got to win. And I thought, you're crazy. You're talking about winning this leg. When he's doing that on the boat, and he turned out to be correct, but was he convincing you and the other members? Did you need convincing, or was that the atmosphere that was on board? Is we've got to win it, and we can win it?
I think there was definitely the element of, he had pressure. There was definitely an element of pressure on him to be like, we've got to win this. So when we had that deficit, it wasn't such a jolly moment, shall we say, on that front. Understandably, there was some pretty interesting conversations at that point. But as you go through and you start to show things on the route, it's like, look, if we just do this, we can definitely close and we can get to this point. Or, being able to demonstrate that helps kind of keep a balance. But I think possibly this is obviously only my first experience of a mixed team in the ocean race, but a lot of people would say, how does it compare to the women's team? Surely the women are all wee. And I was like, no, man, we were way more like this. The men's team, it's like, whoa! I was like, maybe it's just our team, but I'd say I was as surprised at how more up and down, or it was more up and down than I expected, I guess. Maybe actually in the big scheme of things, it wasn't that bad, but it was definitely more up and down than I expected. Different phrases like, I'm in a glass cage of emotion right now, being said. So which I was like, wow, okay, cool. I mean, obviously in a tongue-in-cheek way, but still meaning it slightly.
Well, it must have been fantastic then that dogged belief that we've got to win this one starts going that way when, we're still with a lot of leg left. You're pointing at Hong Kong, you're making this incredibly efficient track, and everyone else is wallowing. So then I want to go on to this incredible moment that happened on the leg where Alex, and this is where, please correct me if I'm wrong, but Alex, I believe, was on the pole, and like all of us, you go, oh, there's a sheet in the water. You just reach a little too far. You just move a little too far. You just go a little bit too close to the risk, and he falls into the water. Obviously, you guys get him back. But put me on board there. Alarm bells go off. That the heart must have stopped a bit.
I mean, I was asleep, so woken up to man overboard, and you're like, what the? And we're going along, and so I literally scrabble out of the bunk, go to the computer to see if anyone's hit the button, and while they've hit the button, you have to hold it for 4 seconds, which is actually a pretty long time in those kind of moments. And so it wasn't, so nothing had been pushed. So I hit the button there, grabbed my deck screen, came on deck, and was just like, right. And, no, you couldn't see him anymore. I probably was on deck about probably 90 seconds, I'd say, maybe a bit more. But by that point, they were already self-furling and turning round. So, I think the efficiency with which they went into that was pretty phenomenal. But when you turn around and you're like, no one can see them, and they're like, we can't see him, and they'd thrown one thing off the back, but it just kind of blew away. You're like, well, okay. And I guess, I guess the big thing was like when he did fall, they did a big wiggle in the track. And so, I was pretty confident that we're going to get back to where he was, and it's not that windy. We're pretty lucky with the daylight, the wind conditions, but, and hugely lucky that Alex then put his arm up like that, because, we all wear our team kit's black, the sea's pretty dark, the waves, it is near on impossible to see someone. You're like, it's insane on that perspective. So, yeah, I think everyone was like, holy moly, this is not good. But I don't know, I think just I didn't have any doubt at that moment that we would find him.
I remember at the time a lot of, armchair commentators, but, good yacht sailors, they weren't on board, so you've got to take it with a pinch of salt. But a lot of people being really impressed with the time from man overboard to back, on board. Touch wood, I've only done man overboards when it's been, okay, someone's going to throw a fender overboard. And even then, to try and match, I think it was it like 7 minutes or something like that, on a big boat hurtling along. It was very efficiently done for the team, I thought.
Yeah, no, within the 90 seconds by the time I was on deck, the sail was pretty much half furled, and that's the big thing. And also just the fact that, Whiskey very quickly just helm hard down, dead downwind, so took the speed off, because obviously we were going along with the mow up, so probably our maximum speed for that wind strength sort of thing. And so just to try and really park us so we're not suddenly ripping away too quickly, so we were pretty much dead downwind, but and then obviously it makes it much easier for the minimal crew on deck. And also that we're in warm climates, so everyone can run on deck and without having to clothe up and stuff like that, and turn the handles pretty quick and turn the boat around. So yeah.
And then of course you guys carry on. You're back underway. Like I say, it time-wise, small moment, but obviously a significant moment. You guys going on to Hong Kong. I can only imagine that the celebrations once you got to dock reflected all the hard work that you've done, because that was the team's home port. And you see, David Witt's face as you guys crossed the line in darkness, but my word, a grin as big as a harbour. You could see how much it meant.
Yeah, exactly. And for the team, the home team, all of it, it was huge. And I guess it's just hard to get your head around. I was still like, wow, I've just kind of stepped on the boat. This is all happening. And then a whole world of stuff happened on the leg. And yeah, it's kind of sort of, even now you sort of think about it, blimey, all that happened on that one leg. And but super, super cool to be part of the team in that experience as well. I think that was, really cool.
And then obviously in the next leg down to Auckland, you guys perform really well as well. And the numbers are all going pretty well. Everybody watching this, anybody that's followed the race will have known what happened with Team Sunhunkai Scallywag on leg 7, where, sadly, John Fisher goes overboard, unable to be recovered. You mentioned before that you hadn't met John before you stepped on board the boat. I'm sure anything like that leaves a pretty strong mark. As somebody that never met John, is there any way that you can kind of, sort of describe what piece he was to that team and why he's so fondly remembered by so many people?
I mean, I think he was the essence of the team to a large extent. The sort of never give up, that whole element and the aspect that a lot of the team did embody or do and do still embody, like wanting to provide opportunities as well, and it was his dream to do the race, and part of that, and with that and his lifelong friendship with Whitty, it was kind of almost his desire to do the race that probably partly more helped convince Whitty to go, yeah, let's do this. Actually, I want to do this with my best mate, and he was just so willing to help. He was like a salt of the earth person, no sort of nothing, he just would accept you for who you are. And I think that's what it is, and just an incredible guy on that front. Like, would always help anyone, and hugely supportive, and was like, yeah, we can get better, we are going to make mistakes, and and I think it's hugely sad. And I guess just the flip side of you someone goes overboard and you find them in 7 minutes, and then someone else goes overboard and you don't even get the opportunity to find them. So I think that's the time goes by and it doesn't get any easier, that's for sure.
Afterwards, when you guys get into the Chilean coast, I think, obviously, you carry on and the team completes the race, completes this dream that, you're saying was John Fisher's dream. How difficult was that, or how easy was that to know we're going to get back on the boat and we're going to keep going?
I think there wasn't really a doubt. I mean, we were bad and good, but we had 6 days at sea trying to get back ashore, where we probably ran through all the emotions under the sun. And even interesting, while we were out there, some people were instantly like, we've got to keep going with the races, the boat's got to carry on. And, at times it was like, no, that's it, we're just going to pack up and, game over kind of thing. And I think, but ultimately it was his dream, and it felt like it would be a bit of a disservice if we didn't carry on. And it's 100%, I'm pretty sure that John would not have wanted us to stop. But it's difficult. I think I found it hard in terms of stepping back on and the responsibility of what I felt from what had happened, and that weighed on me quite hard. And and also wanting to get back on and perform well, and actually I think in both races, that leg, whether you do well in that leg or not, round to Brazil, it is quite a forming leg in a lot of the teams, and actually a lot of teams find another gear in speed, partly because you just go through a leg where it's generally pretty windy and you're having to push yourself because you haven't got an option, that then you step up another gear. And I think that definitely happened for a lot of the other teams on that leg, while we were dealing with getting back in the race. And so I think even so, from that perspective, that was quite hard. We've definitely probably lost a gear there, and also just the Fish was so intrinsic. He was one of our watch leaders. He was just such a core member of the team that I think that sort of also changed the team, makes it hard on that front. But we're pretty lucky with the people we met. Parker coming back was a big asset. I think that was one of the biggest things as a team. We all sort of said, yes, let's do it, let's carry on, but we need to have Parker. He's a core part of this. And so it was amazing when he came and joined us. And then through the course of the race, we had a few different people join, and I think they were all for different things and great things from, being strong offshore sailors or just, part of the Scallywag team as well. And I think that's a big thing.
I don't mean to pry, but there's one thing that you said, and I don't want to just leave it hanging for anybody else to sort of insinuate whatever they think. But you just said, it was hard for you personally, where you were talking about the responsibility of what happened. I mean, obviously, a tragic accident. I can only imagine that everybody in some situation like that would find a reason to wish that they had done certain things differently. But, that's... I mean, you don't wear that around your neck, do you?
For a long time, I struggled with, I guess as the navigator, I felt responsible. I should have been able to find him. I mean, you're looking for a needle in a haystack, but when you're sat there and you've got someone who's just lost his best mate and he's like, we've got to find him. And, you've got a crew also and comms back short. But you do have comms to shore, but it's incredibly hard. We're in 55 knots of wind or something, and we were upside down for 45 minutes pretty much, and just everything. You're like, it's hard, and then you're trying to make your best educated guess on where we should look and all of that kind of stuff, and you sort of feel, I don't know. I'm probably a massive overthinker, and a lot of my friends would probably vouch for that. And so even to this day, there's times where I probably overthink about it and think, could there have been? Is there something? I don't know. I would maybe wrongly so. I didn't actually ask the others, but I was probably one of the first people that thought, well, we're not going to get him back alive, but we can go and get him back. And, and I think just from that perspective as well, it's hard for families and friends, to sort of say goodbye when you kind of can't almost. But yeah, and so I think I felt that responsibility, and that's not that people were putting that on me by any stretch of the imagination. That's a personal put upon myself.
Well, you do carry on as a team, and it's interesting. One thing that you were saying about the Scallywag team is it is a team where you see a lot of youngsters in it. I mean, you mentioned Ben Piggott, Nipper. I mean, was it 21 or something like that? And a lot of these people are still with that team and still sort of working hard. But, you yourself, you do a lot to help the next generation. And this is where I sort of want to ask you about the Magenta Project, because you've been really vocal about females in the sport. And I want to make sure I get this right. I don't want to put any words in your mouth, but in the edition that's coming up, there's been, we've been keeping the female rule. We're going to see females in the boat. But I got the impression that you wanted things to go further. You wanted to see 50-50 maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it strikes me, definitely, given they've got the two classes, it strikes me as crazy, dare I say it, but I have now, that you'd bring in multiple rules about age to make it youth. But why? And you've just talked about, hasn't it been amazing? We've done this with X, Y, Z in 2 on every extent. So from the last race alone, there's 22 women that have gone around the world. So it's not like there's not people. So why would you not just go 50-50 and show true progress? Like, if you're putting in the thing about age, then you're already effectively limiting the previous experience. Because if you also had to go through the fleet, there's not many that will still be under 30 by the start of the next race. So you've already, and in fact, I think out of the women, there's maybe only one, but that's, or two at a push. You correct me if I'm wrong there. But so you've already practically wiped out all of them. So maybe they can fill in the 3 roles that you're allowing for. So you're actually already making it harder. Whereas if you're just 50-50, and then, why not put the age in and be like, okay, you've got to have 225. One's got to be a woman, one's got to be a guy. This is about creating a pathway of progress, and why not make it completely equal? Whereas I also suspect that the youngsters that you get on board, you're more likely to take 2 young lads because they'll be like, well, at least they'll be strong. And that might be me being very cynical, and it would be also quite disappointing if a team actually doesn't choose to do that, go 50-50, because actually there's a plethora of experienced women they could take.
And a lot of these experienced women I mean, this is what we're talking about with the Magenta Project. This is the thing where you are, it's yourself, it's Abby Ealer. I mean, there's a whole bunch of the sort of Team SCA crowd. It feels like you've sort of taken it upon yourself to do the things that maybe, to use your words, the organisers of offshore racing and keelboat racing should be doing.
Yeah, I mean, arguably, I guess our big thing is advocating and lobbying with these events from, and fair play, the ocean race is actually ahead of the curve. You can look at some other high-level circuits that need to not jump on the bandwagon, but really look at where they think the sport should be and go. And I think they actually have a responsibility for it, is my view. I think that was something everyone from SCA, we all sat together and set up the Magenta Project, and I think that's something that that was one of the big things, is like, if we don't keep pushing now, and even if you talk to the women that were from previous female teams or previously in the race, they say the same thing of actually the momentum just got lost, and that was a big thing. We were like, we need to keep pushing, and it's hard, and if the ocean race hadn't put the rule in, would there have been any women in the last edition of the race? Probably not, which is pretty tragic to think. And then you're like, and even with this rule, and then it's just a shame that if you think about it, if you make it 50-50, the pool of people that then have the experience, you're then instantly just changing that. Whereas at the moment, it's like, oh, well, there aren't that many people to pick from. And it's like, well, that's because they're not getting, whereas there's the more, that's because they've had the opportunity and done it. And, whereas, yes, you can, there's also the argument, because, I would almost say with the 60s, so obviously it's a bloody tight boat and I haven't been on it, so I don't know how it would be tight to sail with 6. But you've also got to be a certain type of woman that wants to go around the world with 5 other guys in close proximity going to the toilet on a bucket next to them. And you're the only woman on board and you're listening to 4 other guys chat for 9 months of the year. I mean, I also think that's fantastic, because again, if they didn't have the rule, there's probably, certain teams for sure would, because also I think a lot of the people that come from that angle will be coming from the Vendée, and actually there's a bit more diversity there, and you'll see how the teams form that way. But ultimately, even in that, I would have been like, it's a 5 crew setup, 2 have to be women, or you can have 3 women, 2 guys, but it's as close as you can get to 50-50, because how many guys would go around the world as the only guy in a 4 female team? Would they? How would they feel about that? Okay, you're coming round. Yeah, you've got a great spot. It's a fully funded, blah, 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 top heads team. You can have a spot. How do you feel comfortable? How comfortable do you feel? And the trouble is actually we'll probably very rarely, I'm not saying we won't be in that position, but it's highly unlikely that you'll flip the table round, that actually a guy can experience what a woman would experience, or that's just my sort of thought process on it. But yeah, I think, hopefully the next edition they'll push towards more 50-50, but arguably they haven't started this one yet. They could still change the rule and make it 50-50 for the 65s. Go on, Ocean Race, do it!
They'll watch this, but either way, I'll push it as well when I get a chance. No one listens to me, but I'll push it. I mean, do you have an opportunity to maybe do that? I mean, have you still got that fire in you to come and do another one and, do the 50-50, do the all-female, do whatever you want, but do you want to join a team and do the race again?
Yeah, I'd love to join a team and do the race again. I think it's almost it's almost like an incomplete thing, partly given what happened last time. Like, I feel like I sort of need to see it through almost in a way, but also it's again, as anyone who ever says it, you kind of either love it or hate it, but it gets under your skin, and it's such a cool thing to do with the crews that you make, the teams that you make, and the experience that you have, and just that feeling. Like I was even saying to Abby just today, God, just having been in lockdown and no one's really gone sailing, I went out in just my little dinghy and was like, oh, just that feeling, that moment you just step on the boat and push off the dock and you're like, there it is. Actually, that's the feeling I long for. And and I just love the racing. Like for me, in terms of, I guess, what my knowledge and, you know, from being able to put the weather, the racing from right down to right, actually, this is a short course as we leave the start of the leg to, okay, now we're back into big gameplay and things like that. Like that is a huge thing. You know, the 60s really appealed to me because I think then the navigator becomes much more involved as part of the crew, and I sort of missed that aspect. Like I feel there's a part of me that's been like, oh, you're a navigator, that's what you do. You don't necessarily need to be so involved. And on the 65s, when you've got 10, you kind of, there isn't a huge amount to do once you're going in a straight line.
Poor old navigators, you're banished to your little corner, your little huddle corner.
I mean, admittedly, I get to stay dry, but prior. But yeah, I mean, for me, like that appeals usually to be able to actually be like, you know, racing, not that I wasn't racing the boat, but actually be part of making the boat go fast in a different way in terms of the driving and trimming and the setup and stuff like that, versus sort of nudging people about the numbers towards changing that, or going, oh, maybe we could look at something else, or but actually being a bit more intrinsic, that's super appealing. But also with the 65s and the rule change, like, I mean, if it was a 50-50 or that kind of thing, I just think the appeal with the 65s is the fact that it is creating the pathway and perhaps the opportunity to pass on that experience, and I guess arguably to maybe gain experience as a watch captain in that role, or just, you know, even as the navigator and in that role where you also got the experience of the previous two editions and are around people that have less experience. I mean, at times on Scallywag, it was a bit more like that. Like there was definitely a look to me to like, well, you've gone around the world on one of these before. You know, I think on possibly on the leg from Hong Kong, other than it was only Parker and I, and then from the leg from Hong Kong to New Zealand, it was only myself that had arguably gone around the world on one of those boats anyway. And so you sort of, you know, there is definitely a level of, you know, not respect, but definitely a level of, okay, what do you think, and that kind of thing, and, you know, that sort of opportunity to help and that kind of thing. I think that's super cool. And to try things.
Yeah, I'm hoping that what we get to see is we either get to see Libby Greenhalgh, navigator, or indeed, as you say, crew member on one of the boats, or if not that, plenty of your sailors that you're helping with the Magenta Project, filling any and all available crew slots that they can find. Thank you very much for a very frank conversation about some very enjoyable subjects and some very difficult subjects as well. Thank you very much for talking us through it.
No worries, it's been a pleasure.
Well, my thanks to Libby Greenhalgh for her time. Confident opinions, but maybe that's what you need to be a good navigator. If you've got some ideas as to who we should be talking to next, leave us a suggestion in the comments below, and you can subscribe for more interviews to come over the following weeks. See you next time.